excited to be here today. As mentioned earlier, my name is Campbell, and before I begin, I'd like to extend a special thanks to Minna Hojadi for sparking the conversation between CNH and U of S, getting the ball rolling on that, and Operations Management Student Association for putting this on for us today. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of an insight what it was like to be an intern at Holland, Saskatoon, and shortly after that, Seth will discuss WCM and what it has done for us as a plant and potential future job opportunities for upcoming students. So a little bit about me, just to kind of give you an insight as to where I came from, as to how I got to where I'm getting. I'm originally from Holland, Saskatchewan. Since high school, I've been working in the oil field, and while I was there, I found that I was more in a job than a career, and I wasn't too happy about that. So I wanted to pursue a higher education. I came down to U of S, and my mindset when I was coming down here is I knew I wanted to be project coordinator. I knew I wanted to manage something, coordinate some sort of project movement, whether it's plant creation or, in this case, manufacturing products. And so when I came here, I decided right away that I'm going to become an operations management student. And just by show of hands, how many people are operations majors here today? All right. See, when I was here, and I selected my major, there's 5 of us. So there's a lot more there today. And now we've got a student association, and I'd really like to be a part of it, but just keep this pretty busy here at work. So I'm still a student here at the Edwards School of Business. Unfortunately, I kind of cut back a little bit on that whole school time, more part-time and full-time work now. But in my second year of university here, I entered into the co-op education program. And those of you who are unaware of that, I would highly recommend you go and talk to Greg Wellman and giving you a down low on what the co-op can do for you. Really, it's given me, it's opened up a lot of doors for me. So enough about me, and it's time to talk about the internship. So I started as an intern at CNH back in January of 2012. My first position there was a building materials technician. For those of you unaware what a building materials technician is, it's where you discuss or go through the different routings, basically in the bloodline of what we call IMC, it's your materials demand systems. And I believe in 495, Jai will probably bring you through that, what it would like to create routings and allocate labor to that and make sure that your purchasing and everything is all up to par. So that was my first job. It was okay. It wasn't exactly like I wanted to do there. As I mentioned before, I was more project orientated. So I sat down with my boss a couple of months into my internship. I had mentioned this and expressed my feelings that this is what I'd like to pursue, and I'd see myself furthering my career in Campeau and Holland. So he says they got a treat for me, and he says you can go ahead and coordinate the RGT3 build in Detroit, Michigan. So those of you who don't know what RGT3 is RGT is a reliability growth testing. Essentially, just to sum it all up, is testing the prototype, making sure that it's no issues are going to happen for the end result customer. And during the third phase of the RGT3 testing is where manufacturing gets involved. So we usually have a core team for the manufacturing plant, and as I mentioned, this one was in Detroit, Michigan. So we had an off-site build. So they needed somebody to be coordinating the components that were built in the plant, discuss with border crossings, making sure that all our country of origins, our pricing, and all our document was in proper organization. So that was my main concern. My second main concern was to record and discuss with the off-site team, the on-site team, the issues that manufacturing had identified during that build. Just kind of an example of an issue that may have come up, real simple. Let's take a metal plate, we're going to want to bolt that to the machine. It takes 25 bolts to throw this thing on and fasten it down. For manufacturing, that's a bit of an issue, 25 bolts. Obviously, it's going to cost us a bit more time, more efficient for us to put it in 12. So I'll work with engineering and kind of get that through, see if we can do a design change on it. And of course, there's a lot more other factors that get involved into that point. So that was about 3 months I was doing that. Expressed to my supervisor that I absolutely loved it. It was great. It gave me a lot of opportunities, and having to work as a building materials technician really gave me the insight on how the organization worked. So today, now I'm a manufacturing engineer, product launch specialist, And essentially what I do is I facilitate the introduction of a new product design from the prototype stage into a manufacturing state. So I work with the product NMEs, which is a manufacturing engineer, and his role is to basically design the flow of the material coming to the plant, ensuring that everything is there on time, we're hitting our quality gates and targets, and that the end product is exactly what is meeting design intent. And so currently right now, I'm working on 3 separate product launches, and soon to be 4. And it sounds like I'll be getting a few here in the future, if everything goes well with these ones. So I'd like to kind of sum up with my co-op experience, saying that you know, this is one that really kind of started my career. I've learned valuable lessons in leadership, manufacturing, planning, organization, and above all, teamwork. And I can't stress to you guys enough that teamwork is really the backbone of anything that I do in the plant. I can never do anything alone. I require a lot on the individuals in each function, all the way from purchasing, all the way up to shipping. These are the individuals that are the resident experts, and they know their material. And so I'm just there to point them in the right direction and work with them. Again, I'd like to stress that I appreciate the opportunities that were presented with me and from New Holland, Saskatoon, and I wouldn't be here today without those. Again, I'd like to also say that thanks to the U.S. for providing me a base to grow upon, and as well as the co-op program providing me a vehicle to do the workforce. So, without further ado, I'd like to give Seth Beytien the floor, and he's going to discuss with you guys what the CNH is and what it has done for us in the plant.
All right, so good evening. My name is Seth Beytien. I'm the operations manager at CNH Saskatoon. Thank you, Professor Jody, for inviting us. And then the purpose for this is really, it's twofold. One is in CNH, as Alex mentioned, we do have a fair number of opportunities. That can be internships, full positions at any given time. We've got about 100 salary jobs, and pretty standard to have 4 or 5 of those open at any given time. We also have internships. We keep about 6 to 12 interns. Kind of depends on what's going on in the business, if we've got more projects, what time of year, because we do have a seasonal product, all those kinds of things. But there are a fair number of opportunities, so that's one reason. Second is just to kind of have a conversation about operations management. And as I saw a raise of hands of the folks that are in operations management, I guess we should be fair and say that in operations there's a lot of other things that we deal with. Quality, finance, purchasing, all of those things are encompassed in the business that we run on a given day. So as we kind of walk through some of that, I'd encourage you, if you've got a question, raise your hand, ask it or blurt it out, whatever. If you disagree with something I'm saying or you have questions, ask. If you want to debate it, we can debate it. So there you go. First thing is a little bit about me. So I went to Iowa State. I got a double major in management and operations and supply chain management. What's that mean? It means that I worked my way through a number of different roles as a process improvement engineer at first, worked my way into an area manager role. So couple years out of school, I was an area manager. As an area manager at Electrolux, I had about 300 hourly folks and 25 or 30 salary folks working for me. At Electrolux, we made washers and dryers for all the weird, boring things to make in the world. But we made about 10,000 of them a day. It was actually a really fascinating place to work. Went through about 1 million pounds of steel a day. So it was a really interesting place. Spent another year, 18 months there. Eventually, I worked for a consulting group and went around and did supplier development. I did that for about 4 years, 3.5, 4 years, for a small boutique firm out of Chicago on behalf of CNH. And what that meant was CNH took all of their 13 plants in North America and he said, give us all your trouble suppliers, right? And we took that list of trouble suppliers, and maybe it was a quality issue, and maybe it was a delivery issue, and we would go help them work through that. So we basically do a quick value stream map in the area and talk to them and kind of find out, whether they had a quality issue or a delivery issue or a capacity issue, try to help them work through that. So that was a unique opportunity for me to see a lot of different places very quickly. Through that time, working with CNH for so long, I ended up kind of getting picked up. Ended up working in Burlington, Iowa. Spent about a year there as an area manager in fabrication. We were insourcing, vertically integrating a huge portion of their business. And so we started working through that. and I eventually got called back up here to Saskatoon as the operations manager. So that's a little bit about my past. We'll see if we can't find the right button here. That was obviously the wrong one. A little bit of information about the plant. It's interesting to me. The plant has been here for some time. It was opened as Flexicoil in 1952. I don't know if anybody's from here in town or has heard of Flexicoil. Flexicoil started a drawbar, and what it is a big coil that they dug behind them in the dirt to condition the soil after planting. And we actually just finished up our last one this year. And this was a big square tube, solid steel that we made into a kind of a 12 or 18 inch coil that we drove behind it. They did that for a very long time, and then they started making air carts, air seeders. I don't know if you guys are farm folks, but you live close enough to a fair amount of agriculture. Flexicoil was actually one of the leaders for a very long time in the air cart design. They were so good, in fact, that at one point or another, New Holland decided that they wanted to buy them out. So New Holland bought them out. They, as New Holland quickly merged with Case IH, and quickly after that actually was acquired by Fiat. So up until recently, CNH was a wholly owned subsidiary of Fiat. Fiat is the same company that makes Ferrari, Fiat, Iveco, makes a bunch of trucks. They also own 51%, 58% of Chrysler, and they're working towards purchasing more of that. So Fiat's a very large organization. So when we look at some of the metrics and some of the ways that we run the business, we need to remember that anything Ferrari, anything Chrysler, anything Iveco, there are literally dozens of brands that you might recognize, all run off of a couple things. One is the metrics that we're talking about. Two is the continuous improvement plan, WCM, that we're going to talk about here today. So a little bit more about the plant. Our facility here in Saskatoon is about 600,000 square feet, 630, 640, somewhere in there. We have a warehouse just off-site. This is an older picture. Sits over here. This is all now kind of developed. So 600,000 square feet under roof at about 156 acres. So a fairly good sized site. We got about 700 hourly folks, 94, 95 salaried folks, and kind of a breakdown of where those fit into the organization. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. No 3PL, and that's a little bit different than many organizations. Most of the plants for CNH in North America, and most of the plants that I've worked for, have a third-party logistics. And by that, what I mean is somebody will come in and deal with all of the movement of parts. So that means all the parts that we bring in and all the product that we ship out is in many places handled by someone else. We do that all internally here at this facility. So to get a reasonable understanding of the plant, a lot of people talk about sales. This is not a perfect number, but our gross sales in CNH in Saskatoon was about $412 million. For CNH globally, in the first quarter, that number would be closer to $4.9 billion. So it's a very large company on a global level. Projected sales this year of about $500 million. So the breakdown of that, one of the things that I heard a lot about in some of my classes was that material versus labor. And this is an interesting conversation. And when you talk to the design guys, they want to push down and make sure that they put as little cost into it, but make a very good product. And my job is then to take that design and the material and work with this 30% added value. So for conversation's sake, and some of these slides are a little bit old, the 2012 forecast 3, we wait until we get the total year done for this. But ballpark numbers here, for the year 2012, when we had $412 million sales, $276 million was our total manufacturing cost. And not uncommon in manufacturing, we're seen as a cost center to our corporate gods, if you will. So they see us only as cost of profit. The P&L is all handled by the commercial side of our business. So the material portion is all centralized. We talk a lot about centralized or decentralized purchasing. One of the things with CNH is our purchasing is totally centralized. So that means that once something is designed, the purchasing group has people who are commodity specialists, and maybe you're a steel specialist, or maybe you're a tire specialist, or a wheel specialist, or a paint specialist. All of that centralized group actually purchases the material, and they're in charge of all the cost and the variances to those costs. What I handle on a daily basis is this portion here, and that's the added value. That added value is really the labor that we put into it, the variable and fixed costs. So when we talk variable and fixed costs, the variable costs would be the labor that we put into it. Fixed costs would be the rent on the building, depreciation, those types of things, right? Any questions on any of that? You guys are all super, super quiet. I'm going to assume that means you're just stunned. Okay. One of the interesting things when we start looking at a plant this size is to kind of talk about where stuff comes from. It's unbelievable the amount of stuff that goes into the different products we make. And we'll talk about that here in a bit. But just to throw some numbers, and you can kind of see our radar chart here. Here's Saskatoon. Here's where most of our product comes from in terms of purchased parts. In that Chicago, Detroit area. One thing we are proud of, and we do try very hard to get going, is our local suppliers. So we have about 18-20% of our supply actually comes from Saskatoon. Typically, not uncommon. If you think about it, what makes sense? Big, bulky, not heavy items. So if you look at this list of items, it's a lot of big, bulky stuff and really small stuff. So big tanks on an air cart that are plastic are made here in town because it costs an arm and an eyeball to ship them up from Detroit. Small fasteners, screws and bolts are shipped straight from wherever they're made, likely China in the global world that we have. Because let's be honest, it's a highly global place, and a chunk of our business does go over to China as well. So you get a feel for how far away stuff is, and you can see this would be kind of that China stuff. Typically, we're not getting anything else from China 7 to 11, or less than 7 or 11 days. A couple of the suppliers that you might recognize here in town: Acrolon Plastics. They make hoods for our corn headers. They make tanks for our carts, and they make tanks for our planters. Siemens, Laser Works. They help us out when stuff breaks. They also make a number of parts for just cut flat patterns for a couple of different headers. High Flex takes care of a lot of our hose requirements. Fastener takes care of a lot of our hardware. But just kind of get a feel there. General layout of the plant. It's tough in my mind. I spend a lot of time there. Right? I spend 8 or 12 hours a day, 5 or 6 days a week at that place. So I see it here, and it feels too blocky and not near detailed enough. But general concept: material comes in the middle here, and we have all of our steel. So we bring in a lot of steel. We spend $450,000 or $500,000 a day on steel. We do a lot of steel. We are a fully vertically integrated facility. So what's that mean? That means when I bring in raw steel, I bring in steel in either tube or flat steel, right? Plate steel. And what we do then is we put it and we cut it up and we torch it and we bend it and we do all sorts of wild stuff. I've got a list of all the fabrication equipment just to give you a feel here in just a second. After we fab it up, then we give it to welding. Everything in green is kind of the welding. And that means that I've got 6 robots. Beyond that, I've got a couple hundred guys that come in it every day and weld away on tools and jigs and make pieces and parts and chunks, all of which then they hang on the paint line. After that, we have 2 paint lines, and it's really 2 separate plants. After it goes through the paint line, then it goes to one of the assembly areas. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the complexity of the plant here in a couple of minutes, but you'll kind of see that we make seeders here and planters here generally. There's quite a little bit more to it than that, but we'll talk about it. And then down here is our receiving area, and it looks pretty small. For a plant this size, it is, and we've had to do some fairly creative things to get past that. 630,000 square feet sounds pretty big, but it goes away very quickly when you have 700 or 800 people that are working all day making bed weapons. So fabrication, again, like I said, we're fully vertically integrated, and by that I mean that we buy all that raw material, all that raw steel, and we dump it into these machines. So we've got VMCs, HMCs, I've got CNC saws, I've got plasma cutters, I've got punch plasma cutters, I've got an oxy-fuel torch, I got brake presses, I got punch presses, if you can make it with steel, we probably have the equipment to do it. It's really, actually, it's a very neat place in that aspect. If you're an industrial engineer or an ME, this is a really cool place because there's almost nothing I can't do to steel in that facility. So it's kind of fun that way. That's my background. I spent a lot of time in fabrication, so I enjoy that portion of the business. We take all that, send it through the process we talked about, and these are the products that we make. So a lot of different products here. Saskatoon is a unique example in that we change over. And I'm sure if we've sat through any sort of operations class, we've talked about one-piece flow. And we are the absolute opposite of that spectrum still. We're working towards it, but we make so many different products that it requires us to actually change over. So draw bars, sprayers, tillage equipment, seeding tools, grain drills, planters, air carts, disc harrows, headers. If you looked at each one of those, they use entirely different products on entirely different well jigs, on entirely different tools in the setup in the assembly area. So they're all very different. You can also see our product, we'll say total volume. And I'll give you a caveat here, and this is where the complexity of manufacturing kind of comes in. Manufacturing is cool because it is very endlessly complex. You know, that concept of bounded rationality, it's hard to know all of it all the time. When we look at this number in 2008, 11,000 units, and this number here, 2013, 6,300, I would think if I looked at that 6,300 is less than 11,000, must have been an easier year in 2013, right? Would everybody kind of agree? Yeah. And it should be, except that when you start looking at the planter numbers, the planters that we built here maxed out at a 40-foot planter, and the planter that I make here actually maxes out at 90 feet. So the volume and the product can actually change enough to the point that in 2008, I tried to run 900,000 standard hours. So I don't know if anybody's familiar with this, the concept of standard hours. Standard hours, how long it should take someone to build something. So if Alex is supposed to build me a water bottle every day, he gets me 1 water bottle. But Alex is a little slow, so it takes Alex 1.2 days. That means that my standard hour was 1, and my pay of that would have been 1.2, right? So that's one of the metrics that we'll talk a lot about, that efficiency or manpower index is something that a lot of companies run on. Helps us understand how efficiently we're running the plant. So that's a feel for that. So yes?
Just with your volumes there, do they tend to be evenly distributed throughout the year, or do you sort of go in pieces?
Absolutely not. Unfortunately, we have a number of seasonal products. So as we look down the list, sprayers are a seasonal product, planters are a seasonal product, air carts are a seasonal product, right? And good for us that we have tillage tools and disc harrows that are used a little bit different times of the year. But if you look at our total annual volume, not uncommon for us to have kind of that peak in the fourth quarter and the first quarter of each year, getting ready for spring planting, right? You get into a really interesting conversation when you start trying to fight back on that, and you end up working through the benefit cost, because there's a carrying cost to all that big inventory, right? And so we get into, and this is a standard conversation in operations class, right? Do you level load the hourly folks and keep your demand steady, or do you build all 6,375 plant or units that you need in the first quarter, right, when commercial wants it? And the reality is you end up somewhere in the middle, because when you look at the carrying cost and the internal rate of return of that of having those goods sit out there, that's kind of where we end up. So we do swing throughout the year, fairly standard. We see less and less of that as we get closer to our capacity as a facility. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sorry, I had another question. So,
sure.
Because you said all your different products have they're totally different products being built. So, if you've got your sprayers are seasonal, do you have a lot of constraints in terms of where your your steel fabrication equipment is set up in your plant, in terms of where it goes and how it?
Yeah, and that's actually a really interesting question. So, one of the things that we find is that when we look down the list of, and I don't have it loaded in here, if you looked at the hours required by product in the different areas, you'd find that planters in particular are very hard on, or use a lot of hours of the heavy cutting centers, the oxy-fuels, the big plasmas. And that during the time of year when we're actually building, say, headers are much harder on the lasers, right? And so you do see our capacity constraint, right, swing in place to place throughout the year because of the mixed bag of stuff that we're making at any given time. Very different than most facilities. In most facilities, I'll tell you, Burlington, Iowa, right? I knew good darn well which two HMCs were my slowest, which were the capacity constraint for the facility. We knew what we had to do when those things broke down. We knew what our playbook was. It's much different here because my constraint in the spring tends to be the heavy cutters, and my constraint in the summer tends to be my lasers for the headers. So it does kind of move on us. Yeah. So product lines, we'll go through this just to give you a feel. Case New Holland is a very interesting company. As I mentioned, it was purchased, purchased at one point or another, Flexiport. So we make up to 3 different brands. And you'll see that we make 3 different brands in the air cart. So we'll just kind of go through this real quick. The pictures don't do it justice, but we make 17 different models of planters. And every time I say a model, think that I have to take all the weld tools, and there might be 100 weld tools for a given planter, throw them outside, bring in another 100, set them in, and then train all the guys to do the other planter, because they are that different at this point. One of the things that we're working towards in Mr. Campbell's role is to commonize a lot of that, simplify the tooling side of things so that you don't inherit all those changes. 4 models of air cart, 3 brands, 4 models, 3 brands of the disc drills as well. 2 different models of corn heads. Actually, those will be done this next April. We're going to ship those down to Burlington. Pickup heads as well. Some of the newer products that we've launched here, and this is a little bit dated. The 1265 planter is that 90-foot planter that we made. One of the things that we had just started here is the M66. That's a disc drill. That's one of the products that Alice really got his start on. It's been very well received in the market. So those are just kind of an idea of some of the different products we make. Where do we ship our product? The product we ship goes all over the place: Australia, Africa, South America, China. You can see the vast majority of it ends up in the U.S. and a lot of it stays here in Campbell. That's mostly where we stay. Right? Not uncommon considering the size of the product that we produce, because it is quite large. We do put them in shipping containers and ship them all over the world, but it's a fair bit more. It's a lot of cost to ship something that size and weight. So we talked. What's that?
I know these products are quite large in size.
Yep.
Couldn't you ship them in parts and assemble it there?
Absolutely. So I may have, let me see if the next slide is not. I typically have a slide on here that would talk to what we call a knockdown build. And this is another interesting thing. Historically, the product that we built, all of our older model products, are what we call a knockdown partially built. They have to go to a setup depot and get built up. So it's not uncommon for us to make a precision hole drill that gets put on 2 different trailers and gets sent to a setup depot because it's so large that it can't go down the road any way we build it and put it together. Now the two problems with that. One really big risk. One problem is that it costs 180 hours to put one of those things together once it's there. The second thing, and really the larger concern for me, is that the further we assemble a product, the more I can assure that the quality is correct for the customer. If I send that out and give it to somebody else to put together, put all the hoses and all the hydraulics on, and they have a problem, I have a real problem on my hands, because I don't know if it was something that I did, something that I designed, or one of the 15 setup depots in the world put together incorrectly. So we really try hard to make sure that we fully assemble a product before it leaves our plant, so we can assure the quality is at the level that we desire. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yep. So a little bit about the complexity of the plant, just to throw some numbers out. 7 different lines, 50 different models, 348 technical types, and 1,289 options. That is not combinations. If we were to do combinations, if everybody's familiar with statistical combinations, if we were going to do combinations in this place, I don't even know what the number is. I don't want to know, because it bothers me all day, every day, and I prefer not to know the number. But you can kind of see where that breaks down by product. The other thing is, when we start talking about bombs, and we start talking about bill of materials. I remember when I was in ops class, bill of material, and it was this general idea, and it made a little bit of sense. And then I started dealing with it and realizing how really big a deal this is a massive portion of our business. So just in fabrication, I have just shy of 10,000 different part numbers that we make. Each one of those has a bomb that is only steel, right? So it starts with You know, a piece of square tube or a piece of plate steel, and maybe it's got 3 or 4 process steps, you know, torch, tumble grind, brake, VMC. Just in that alone, one part, you've got 4 different steps, all of which have their own characteristics in this system. Multiply that times 10,000. That's only the fab parts. After the fab parts are put together, they're welded, then they become a different part number, right? That all has a routing, it all has labor attached. Then you have to add paint, you have another paint, and then you have another part number. The complexity in these places is really incredible, and it's hard to wrap your head around until you actually see it. I remember hearing BOM, bill of material, seeing it, it's like, pretty simple, makes sense. When you start looking at a planter with, you know, 4,000, 5,000 different part numbers and trying to blow down how many of what it uses, it gets very complex very quickly. So even though Alex's first job might have been, I'm sure it was, terribly boring, it's also very important. This is just a quick look at a schedule for us. Scheduling is another very complex trick. It gets very interesting in our facility. It's interesting in most facilities. This is our lines. So we've got E1 through 4 and then 3 in the west side. This isn't going to make a ton of sense to you guys, but each of the different colors is a different product. So this is the 1265 planter, goes up to 90 feet. This is the 24030, which is a front fold, and this is the PT splitter, which sits on its side. All different products. And you can kind of see how we deal with that throughout. Now the other thing to think about is, so you're trying to level load this because 1265 is about the same labor content as 42430s. You're also trying to do it across the plant. And so again, the complexity of trying to keep the level labor load becomes very interesting very quickly. Okay. Any questions about the general setup of Saskatoon, kind of the products that we make, any of that kind of stuff? Is this kind of what you guys want to hear about? You want to hear about something different? Anybody have anything at all to say?
With the scheduling, do you have like a particular software that you use for scheduling to keep that all in line?
I'm glad you asked. This is common in all the facilities that I've ever worked at. So if we look close, this is an Excel spreadsheet. I would tell you that if anybody going into any sort of industry, whether you're going to go into logistics or purchasing, especially finance, definitely in operations, the use of Excel is paramount, right? If before you leave here, you guys have got to know how to run Excel. You got to know how to run pivot tables and do Pareto at very minimal. I could show you spreadsheets that would make a good Excel guy just tear his hair out, because the complexity that our business runs on gets big, and a lot of it runs on Excel. Not all of it. We've got a lot of different systems. So when you talk about systems from the tech side, I have Man, which is an MRP system. I have IMC, which is a homegrown bill of material structure holding device. We are ISO certified, so we have a business management system. So we are ISO 9000, 14000, 18000, and 50000 certified. Right? All of that comes with a lot of policies, procedures, flow charts, checking up the checking, right? And a lot of management of that. That doesn't run in Excel, but a huge portion of it does. If you were to talk to the expediters, you'd find out that expediters, schedulers, master planners, myself, and finance all runs a huge portion on Excel. And that is very common in manufacturing. Yeah, very common. So we'll talk a little bit about plant metrics. Operations is a big chunk about metrics. It doesn't matter who you work for, you're going to end up with 5 or 6 or 2 or 10 metrics that you will do or you will lose your job, right? And that's basically how it works. In the operations side of my business, it's safety, quality, cost, delivery. In that order, and very much on purpose, right? The first one's being safety. If we're making product and we're making money, but we're hurting people doing it, and people can get hurt, it can be a dangerous place. This has got to be a really big deal for us. One of the things that's happened in CNH Saskatoon is WCM. We go back to 2008. We were trying to run that 900,000 hours. Never quite made it. We had a lot of problems. We just inherited a number of products. We were going like gangbusters, couldn't make enough stuff, and the frequency of the lost time injuries. And so you break into first aid. First aid means somebody hit their thumb with a hammer, and last time, I mean, somebody had to take a day off because they got hurt that bad. And it's not uncommon in manufacturing, especially globally, for people to die. I mean, it absolutely does happen. So we take that very seriously. We had 34 lost time injuries in 2008. And that is not a good record. We break that into a frequency index so we can normalize a bit for the number of hours pumping through the plant. Because if I had 34 in 2008, but 15 in 2009, maybe I ran less than half the hours, right? So we normalize that data a little bit. We actually just passed 3 million hours no lost time injury. That's a huge deal. If you look throughout North America, I've been in manufacturing, I don't know, 10 or 12 years. I've never heard of 3 million hours before. I'm sure it's happened before, but 5 or 8 years ago, 1 million hours was a pretty big deal. People make shirts and jackets. 2 million hours was a really big deal for us as a company. This is the first time anybody at CNH has hit 3 million man hours. It's a very big deal. So I can tell you that it was about 2 and change years ago now that a guy was outside, slipped on ice. It's Saskatchewan, slipped on ice, hurt his bum, got a backache, and ended up needing surgery for it. And that was the last time that somebody had to take time off because of the incident in Saskatoon. So that's one of the first ones we look at, and again, very much on purpose. One of the ways that we have affected that so much, and you see that swing from 34 lost time incidents in 2008 to 3 million man hours now, has a ton to do with WCM. So by show of hands, who's heard of WCM before? Anybody? WorldClass Manufacturing. And I'll tell you, I've worked at Electrolux, EMD, CNH. I've been to a number of different facilities. Everybody has their own name for what we're about to talk to. And really, it's just lean, okay? My boss's boss would be super upset if he heard me say that WorldClass WCM is just lean. But the reality is, most of the tools are the same. So whether you're going to go, and a lot of it goes back to Toyota production systems. Everybody here has, I'm sure, heard that Toyota does lean pretty well. Yes? Yes, a little bit, kind of. Okay? Toyota does a great job. They've been doing it for a very long time, right? They've been working on it for 50 years. We're a little fresher. WCM is our brand of that. It's a globally recognized organization, and when we do audits, it is audited by an out-of-company representative. So my boss will go and audit a Chrysler facility, and a Chrysler or Iveco person might come and audit CNH, but never CNH to CNH to try to keep it kind of square. We score a 54. 54 doesn't mean much unless you kind of understand it a bit. And the one thing I'll say about WCM in different from the other lean methodologies that I've worked through, or continuous improvement methodologies, many of the same tools on the safety side. So you're going to talk about safety incident reporting and the way that you do that, root cause and how you get to the root cause and how you fix it. When you talk about losses and wastes, you're going to go to the 7 wastes. You're going to talk Pareto's, all those kinds of things, right? Ishikawa diagrams, 4Ms. We'll go through kind of a list of them. Many of the same tools, right? But this is just our method. So we're actually the #1 plant in CNH in North America, and the first out of 30 plants in the world for WCM. We'll kind of walk through what WCM is, what that means for us. It's important for us for a number of reasons, and you saw KPI would be a key performance indicator. And that would be like the incident frequency index that we talked about earlier, and how much that's dropped since 2008. It's important in that we empower the employees, because I'll tell you from my experience, the folks on the floor know how to make something better. They spend 8 or 10 hours a day for years on end in the same spot. If you think that Mr. Campbell is going to show up for 4 hours and show him how to do his job better, you're insulting him, right? And that's just true, right, for the vast majority of what goes on. The other thing is, we live in a very globally competitive environment, and it's important for us. We talk about that total cost per hour. We run about $95 cost per hour, and it's important for us to stay competitive on a global level, because if we're not, they'll find someone else to make it for us. So one of the things that we're very proud of, since 2011, 9% of our transformation cost $5.6 million saved. 2012, 9.2% of transformation cost $5 million saved. That means that we spent that much less money in our facility to produce the same product. And we break those savings down into hard, virtual, and soft. Hard being savings that is, would have hit the bottom line. Virtual meaning I have to kind of rebalance to get some of that. Soft meaning you saved me some time, but I didn't go down by any people. That kind of makes sense. Any questions on any of that? Okay. So another way that we, again, WCM is a grassroots effort, and it's very important for the folks on the floor to have a say. So as the operations manager, I'll tell you, when I take a walk, I try very hard to talk to the folks on the floor because they are the people doing the work. There's no doubt about it. This is one of the metrics that we take a look at to understand how much employee involvement we do have, how many suggestions we have, and what percentage of those are implemented. This was last year, 2,500 suggestions and 61% implemented. 61% sounds a little low, but it's actually a pretty good number. If you can get 50 or 60% of the suggestions that you get implemented, you're doing very well. And I say that because all of the suggestions work on a benefit cost. So if somebody has a suggestion that's going to save me $1, but cost me $1.25, it's going to be a while till I get there, right? If somebody has a suggestion that's going to save me $1,000 a day and cost me $1, I'll see you in the morning, right? It really depends on that benefit cost. And we break that down into a ratio, Pareto them out, and hit the top ones first. There's many of these that we probably will never hit, even though they do have a benefit cost over time. But it is important to kind of watch that and track that. The other thing is Kaizens, or Kaizens. I don't know, has anybody heard of a Kaizen here? A little bit? Small improvement. So when we talk Kaizen, it doesn't have to be something massive. It can be, but doesn't have to be something massive. Another one that we track, we actually have 4,000 Kaizens this year from the 735 people that we have hourly in the facility. So we're very proud of that as well. Again, that's the employees having some feedback in terms of how we run our business and who does what.
Yep. Two quick questions on those,
Sure.
on those employee suggestions. Is there an incentive for the employees to contribute a suggestion? And two, can you give us an example of a suggestion that you've implemented?
Absolutely. So the first answer is yes. There are incentives. So we try very hard, Machiavellian-ish. We try to positively reinforce good behavior and negatively reinforce bad behavior. Right. So one, we definitely have a minimum number of suggestions and Kaizens that people are supposed to put in. If they don't do that, that definitely works against us. As a plant, we have metrics that we're supposed to hit for suggestions, and if we hit that, then everybody gets $75, I think it is. Okay? So that's for the whole group. And you get into that group think mentality, and that can help quite a bit. The next part of that is, I will actually go around with my boss, plant manager, once a week, and we'll give out $50 or $100 to the person with the best suggestion for the last week. Okay? Last week, we went out to the planter line, and we've recently implemented a cable drive. This will make a little, so I'll try to make this make sense. The cable drive kind of hung down and drug on the floor, and we got, our quality group caught it and said, hey, you're scuffing the bottom of the cable drag or the cable drive. One of the guys thought up on the line, a little gizmo, it's what it is thick wire bent correctly. We made up a couple hundred of them, and now they put them on the planter and hang them in such a way that, one, it's actually easier for them to install them as they hang, so it actually saved a little bit of time, and we don't get the quality incident. So, did it save us a lot of money? No. It's going to save us, whatever, $5,000 a year, right? Something like that. Drop in the bucket when you look at what we have to do for cost savings. But you do that 5,000 times, and you're talking about some pretty serious money, right? And some of the Kaizens are very large, right? The largest Kaizen we have this year will save us $300,000, right? The smallest one that we've got, is the difference between keeping the water bottle here and here because it's closer to me, right? And saves, we'll call it a penny. It probably doesn't save that, right? But it helps the person kind of feel like they can change their work center a bit, and they can because it's easier for them, right? So we definitely try very hard to incentivize. Just a little kind of an overview of some of the WCM stuff. Again, worked very hard to include the operators and make sure that all operators are collecting wastes and losses and use standard methods to address those issues. Kind of our WCM evolution in 2008, when things were pretty bad, we had 34 lost time incidents, never made the delivery, never made the 900,000 hours. We had scored, if I recall, it was a 14 on our first, or something very reasonable like that. Kind of see where our progression has gone along, and now 254 last May. We've got another audit coming up here in another few months. Another month, actually. Going quick. Clarity of objectives, and this really goes in with WCM as well. One of the big things in WCM is making sure that you understand your wastes and losses, measure how you're tracking that, right? So we've got KPIs and KAIs, so key performance indicators and key action items that help us understand how well we're doing something. And these are metrics that probably every corporation that you might go out there and work for measures. They might call it something a little bit different. There's somebody somewhere needs to come up with an acronym dictionary, but it wouldn't be the same at every company anyway, so it's kind of a waste of time. But we'll go through a few of these just because it is important. That lost time frequency index is the first one. You can see safety, quality, cost, delivery. It's going to be in that order almost always, very much on purpose. So safety, good. Quality. And quality, we're going to talk about a number of things. CQA is when we have somebody go around to a product and take a look and measure and check and test and see, make sure that the product actually hits all of our requirements. WCM roadmap is our score in WCM. We track absenteeism. Absenteeism costs us as a company a lot of money. And actually, if we were to look at it year to date now, we'd actually mention that. But a number that we're pretty proud of, because that's not a high number. And that's trying to get people bought into what we're trying to do. Suggestions for an employee, we just talked about. Again, just making sure that everybody's kind of part of the success. Delivery on okay to ship. So they'll track, this gets a little bit complicated, but when we go to make a product, it goes offline, and if it goes offline with all of its parts and everything is correct, then it goes okay to ship. And if it doesn't, then it goes into what we'll call fleet. So if I run out of a decal, because a decal supplier in Michigan ran out of the right glue, then I end up sending a bunch of planters to fleet. And that starts to matter because the dollars that move around because of that become very big very quickly. So linearity, what else do we have on here? Parts reliability, and this is really a full lead time. So this is if somebody goes down in the field, how well do we service them? How well do we get them the part they need to get back? The last one we'll talk about is MI, and that's that manpower index or efficiency. It's a very common metric and something that almost every company pays a huge amount of attention to. Okay. Again, clarity of objectives and trying to make sure that we've got that the results going up and the goal alignment down. And so throughout the facility, we make sure that the plants, my managers, the salaried employees, and the hourly folks all kind of have the same vision of what we're trying to do because it gets a little bit convoluted. If I talk to my boss, Frank, and he says, Seth, we want more suggestions, I have to find a way to tell 1,000 people we want more suggestions. And you really have to have some manners to do that. So we've got a lot of different ways that we do that. We use our business system. Again, we'll go through the goals that he's accountable for, the goals that my managers are accountable for, the goals that the supervisors are accountable for, and the hourly folks, and the incentives that they get for achieving those, whether it's suggestions, productivity, or safety. And we do have incentives at every level for hitting those goals throughout the facility. Making sure that those are aligned from the management perspective can be very important. We also do a lot of communication. Communication can be very hard, and we've all seen, I don't know if we were in second grade when somebody whispers, the spider has 8 legs, and by the time it got around to Professor Majati, I was hearing about my cat's dog. Right? It all changes that quickly. So we try to put this out on the floor so that people can take their time, go see it, go read it, be up to date on our metrics as a facility. Who's done how many Kaizens and saved us how much money. Where the different pillars in WCM are at in terms of their metrics and their goals, what kind of activities are going out on the floor, where we're at for our safety, and every single department has its own board so they can go see what's going on in that department specifically. A lot of administration when you start looking at this, very important again to kind of align those goals throughout the facility. So some of the WCM tools, we talked a little bit about this, but we'll just kind of go through a list. I would suspect that there's a number of tools here that you guys would recognize. On the quality side, we talked about some of these DOE, PPA, ANOVA, regression analysis, all stuff that's really dealt with on the statistical side of quality. Low-cost automation, Kaizens, NBAA really has more to do with, quick Kaizens have to do with everybody, but low-cost automation, NBAA, SOPs, that really has to do with the industrial engineers, the MEs, and their daily tasks. PERCAs, POCIOs, all of these things, man. This is a bunch of, it's a big bunch of buzzwords that pretty much everybody uses. This is a small list of what is hundreds of tools that we use in the facility to make sure that we're progressing going forward. Any questions on any of that? We're almost out of time, so I wanted to just quickly touch on two things. We talked about a lot of stuff. At the end of the day, if we look at the difference between 2008 and 2013, 2008, the plant had been tasked with about 900,000 hours. We never achieved it. We got 889, some silly number like that. We couldn't make enough product. We actually had 200 and change people more at that time than we do today. I'll hit 900,000 hours by the end of this year in my sleep. I don't even have to get up and worry at night. There's no problem about it. And we'll do it with just about 200 people fewer. And I would credit that a lot to WCM. When we look at the total savings from 2008 to 2013, you're talking about $15 million in a heartbeat. And that continues on perpetually because we're running more efficiently than we did before. All because we listened to the folks on the floor and what they had to say. And the next one, and I'll put it up here again, 3 million hours, no lost time. Again, that is something that we've worked very hard for. It's something that we've done an awful lot to do, and has a lot to do with WCM doing proper root cause analysis and making sure that we understand the problem to properly fix it. So just a little bit of results that WCM has affected on a grand scale since 2018. So that's all I had, guys. If does anybody have any questions? Is there a quiet group? Sure.
Yeah. I wonder if you can, sort of describe what you do in a typical day as an operations manager.
Yep. My typical day isn't that typical. It changes quite a little bit. I do have a standard, a few standard things I do every day. Every day, I typically get to work between 6 and 7. I have a 7:30 meeting with my staff and the managers to make sure, understand what happened yesterday. If there are any problems, what are we doing to make sure it doesn't happen again today? What are the issues that we know about today that we need to pay attention to? Do we have any safety issues? And make sure that those are all properly addressed. Right? So safety, quality, cost, and delivery are all taken care of there at that 7:30 meeting. Every day, at 3 o'clock, I have a Gemba. Gemba is a go see, right? So I go out to the floor and observe one of the 25 or 50 projects that we have on the go at any single time. So I'll go out there and actually talk to the folks that are doing the project, make sure that they understand, make sure that I understand that we're all kind of guiding in the right direction, and see that we've got some continuity there. So that's every day from 9 to 10. 10:30, I've got a meeting with so it's a lot of meetings, it's very boring some days. I've got to meet with my managers to see if there's anything cooking throughout the day and talk to them about the metrics, right? If anybody's not hitting their targets, if anybody's red where they're supposed to be green, they better have reasons why. If they don't, then I'm going to find somebody that will, right? It can be a very tough, cutthroat world some days. Those are kind of the standards. Past that, it's not uncommon for me to have meetings about strategy long-term. So strategically, what are we going to do with the air cart as we move into our next product that Mr. Campbell was working on? What does our schedule look like for PO? We have to do that monthly. On a monthly basis, we go through the PO and make sure that we have the correct head count with my folks. So all of those types of things are dealt with very consistently. Pretty much any metric that you saw there, I deal with on a fairly regular basis. Any other questions?
Since you think of introducing new products, do you have the capacity to?
Capacity is an interesting question in our facility just because of the change, the changeover nature that we have. My short answer is yes, always, right? I'm not in the business of turning business down. The more hours are brought into my plant, the better my cost absorption of my fixed costs are. And so I will eagerly bring in any product that I can. The new product that Alex is working on now, which is a large air cart, actually replaces 4 of the products that we currently make on one line. So we'll switch that out. The net hours will be an increase, but we'll go down in changeover, so we'll be able to accommodate that. So Capacity is something we spend an awful lot of time on. It really has to do with our product mix as much as anything.
How do you decide which product and which model to produce and what quantity to produce?
It is a process and a half. So the first part of it goes off of forecasting. The one thing we all know about any forecasting that we've done is it's at least partially incorrect, right? It's our best guess. So we have a commercial group that goes out to the sales guys and they say, okay, how much are you going to sell? And they say, $1 million. And then somebody kind of talks them down from $1 million and they say, okay, 100. Right? We go to all the sales guys and they consolidate all that, and the commercial group then works with our master schedulers. So we have 3 master schedulers that then take those demands and work through the process to try to do a number of things. One, they're trying to level load the labor as much as possible, because that's important so that I'm not hiring and firing and doing this, right? Because that causes chaos. I don't like it. If we can avoid that, that's good. Then what they do is try to make sure that they're doing it in such a way as to reduce the number of changeovers we have, because a changeover for us is dead cost. Last year we put in 42,000 hours of changeover, and that cost the company $1.2 million, $1.3 million. Right? This year for the forecast we dropped that by 2/3. Much to do because we've done SMED projects on those changeovers, so we put in about $400,000 of changeover. But that's dead time for a line where we can't be producing because we're taking these tools out, putting those tools in, training people how to do it again. Because maybe you're new and have never done it, and maybe it's just been a year. And they work. The MPS folks work a lot with the production planners in terms of the mix. Mix gets very interesting as well because you might have a product that's the heavy hydraulic unit has 20% more hours than the light hydraulic unit, so you have to. There's rules of the road for each product line and product line and definitely consideration for space, or not space, but capacity constraints as well. There's a lot to that. We've got some folks that are really good at it. I'm glad they're there because I couldn't. Anybody else?
How does automation fit into your product?
There's a very interesting question. So in most facilities at our level of WCM, we would have cleaned up all the low-hanging fruit and taken care of a lot of the stuff that you can do just by working hard or working smart. Typically, at this point in our journey, we'd be looking for processes that we could automate so that you can continue to decrease our costs. Because at the end of the day, that's our job, is to make sure that we're making a safe product, a good product that will continue to sell. We have to reduce costs. We don't have an enormous amount of costs simply because we have so much changeover in the facility. So I've got 6 robots and a couple cells that are semi-automated. But it's not like an automotive plant where when you make the same product every day, you can really automate a lot of stuff. And it's something that we're struggling with, quite frankly, because we want to reduce that cost, and it's tough to do without the automation. So we have taken advantage of it where we can. And if anybody's a specialist wants to come in and take a look, give me some ideas, doors are open. And that's something else I should say. We'll gladly schedule tours. If you guys want to come see the place, talk about it, hear about it, listen to me talk is kind of boring. If you want to come and see it, we'll gladly arrange tours because it is kind of a neat place to see. Anybody else?
Maybe I'll take the last question so we can still have time for networking afterwards. If you could snap your fingers and solve one problem, something that should be solvable but always keeps coming back, what would it be?
Yeah, nothing I should admit in public. I guess my real honest answer would be safety stuff. That's the stuff that bothers me the most. If I could guarantee that nobody ever gets hurt coming to work, that would make me feel the best. Because I take it very personally when someone gets hurt. We work very hard to make sure that we don't have to snap our fingers, using root cause to find out what actually happened. And most of the time we're successful in making sure that it doesn't occur. But that's my biggest concern. I take a lot of pride in that. I don't want somebody to come to work, lose their finger, break their arm, get hurt. That is my biggest concern.
Thanks so much.
So there you go. Thank you very much.